In fly fishing we have two types of fly casts. We have an overhead cast and what we call an underhand or a spey cast. The overhead cast is a cast where you have the line flying in the air behind you and in front of you. Whereas the underhand or the spey cast is a cast where you place the leader on the water and then you cast from there. When I go fishing I like to use the overhand cast as much as possible, simply because it's a very effective cast, it's easy to make a good presentation and you don't disturb the water. To make a good overhead cast there are some principles that we need to use. A very important element in all fly cast is when you raise the fly line. Some people, they go fishing and they hold the rod up here and that creates a loop of line that is hanging. So when they try to make the cast from here, it's almost impossible to create the cast and the line will be lying very low in the air. What we need to do is we need to raise the line, and that means we take the rod and we put it down so that we are very close to the water surface. From there we have a stretched arm and then we bend the arm and start raising the rod and thereby taking the line off the water. So we raise the line, start slowly, and then we accelerate to a stop. By doing this raise and then accelerate to a stop, we create a line loop that flies up in the air, rolls out and then starts to fall. This means that we have a relatively high line lying in our back cast. From there it's easy to make a good forward cast and create a narrow loop, because if the line is lying too low, the loop will become bigger. So we raise the line, accelerate to a stop. After the stop, I follow through with the rod. I reposition the rod from this position to a bit more backwards. I do this so that I get more place to accelerate my cast. We call this pendling or drifting. From this position, I then do my forward cast. I accelerate the rod by pushing the butt of the rod into my stomach, so to speak, and then I create the stop. The reason why I do the pendling or the drift is if I don't do that, then the line will be lying in a direction where if I try to make my forward cast, I will then make a tailing loop. So it's very important that in the back cast that you reposition your rod, do the pendling or the drift, so that you have a good exit point for your forward cast. If we put it together in speed, it looks like this. I raise the line, accelerate to a stop, drift, and then make my forward cast. Let's do that again. I raise the line, accelerate to a stop, drift, accelerate forward, stop, and let the line go. This is, in basic, the overhead cast. A very effective cast. When I'm overhead casting, I normally don't do any false casts. I strip in the line so that the belly of the fly line is just outside the rod tip, and then I raise the line, accelerate, cast, and then I let the line go. So I shoot the distance. Just one cast and then I'm back to fishing. There are some situations where it's not possible to do an overhead cast, simply because you don't have the space. You could have trees behind you, vegetation of some sort, hills, whatever. In these situations, it's important that we can do what we call an underhand or a spey cast. Now, there are some physics in this that are very important to understand, and that will help you to be better at doing these casts. First element that is very important is raising the line. You have to do this really slowly, just like I'm doing right now, really slowly. Because by doing this you keep tension on the rod tip, and that is important because what we want to do from this point where we raise the line is that we want to move the line so that the leader lands next to us on the water here. That is our anchor point. That is what will help us load the rod. So we want to move the line from down there up here. By doing this we create what is called a D-loop. That the line is going from the rod tip down to the water and it looks a bit like this. This D-loop is very important in terms of getting the right amount of load in the rod. If we make a very little D-loop like here, it's difficult to make a good forward cast. Simply there's not enough power in the cast to do it. You have to use a lot of power to straighten the line. Whereas if I've moved my leader to up here, I have a lot of power in my cast and it's easy to stretch it without me having to use more force. So getting the leader up here and having an anchor point next to you is very important in an underhand or a spey cast. What's important to understand is we want the line to form like this type of form here, where the leader touches the surface and then the line goes up. In order to do that we have to move the rod tip in the same pattern. So if we go back to the beginning here, I have the fly rod close to the water surface. I raise very slowly. What I then do is I rotate the butt part of the section, accelerate to a stop, and then the line or the tip of the rod goes like this, backward. Then, when I get to this point and I want the fly line to land or the leader to land on the water, I make a drift or I do a pendling with the rod. This takes out a bit of the power in the D-loop and sets the leader on the surface so that I can control where my anchor point is. Furthermore, it repositions the rod so that it's easy for me to do a good forward cast. The forward cast is the same as in the overhead cast. You accelerate to a stop and then the line moves forward. If we put this together in speed, it looks like this. Rod tip down, slowly I raise the line, then I rotate the rod, stop, pendle to place the leader on the water, and then I may make my forward cast like this. Raising the line, rotating, pendling, accelerate to a stop. And there you have it, an underhand or a spey cast.